Hello students, how are you? So in the previous video of the fundamental unit of life, we studied about cell, discovery of the cell, cell theory, structural organization of cell, and types of cell like prokaryotic, eukaryotic. Okay. In the previous video, I told you about the cell membrane. Okay. And I told you that it is living thin and it allows certain substance to pass through it. So today we will talk about the movement, okay, and especially of the water, that how does the water move in and out of the cell, and also yes, the gaseous exchange of the cell, because it is very important for the living. Cell also need oxygen and water to sustain its life. So how does that oxygen, that water gets into the cell? Okay, so how does the movement of substance takes place into the cell? Some substance like carbon dioxide or oxygen can move across cell membrane by a process called diffusion. Okay, this is very important process, diffusion. Now what is diffusion? It is said that spontaneous movement of substance from region of high concentration to the region of low concentration. Again, spontaneous movement. Spontaneous means that happens automatically. It does not require any energy input. It takes place automatically. So it is a spontaneous movement of substance from region of high concentration to region of low concentration. Means where the water will be more, it will move to the place where the water will be less, or where the oxygen will be more, it will move towards where oxygen will be less. So it is the spontaneous movement of the substance from region of high concentration of any substance that we are talking. If we are saying of carbon dioxide, if we are saying of oxygen, we will understand with the example also, but it is a spontaneous movement of substance from high concentration to low concentration. Okay, like I said, if water is more outside the cell and inside the cell it is less, then the water will move inside the cell. Now when CO2 accumulates in high concentration inside the cell and cell's external environment has low concentration of CO2, when will this condition happen? You know that the cell is performing various activities. Okay, and when the cell will perform various activities, it will consume definitely oxygen and it will produce carbon dioxide and other waste products. So then the CO2 accumulates in high concentration inside the cell and the cell's external environment has low concentration of CO2. Now what will happen? As soon as there is a difference of concentration of CO2 inside and outside a cell, CO2 moves out of the cell by the process of diffusion. It is saying as soon as there is a difference, means even if there is a little difference of the concentration, then the CO2 will move out of the cell. Okay, why it is moving? Again, because CO2 has been accumulated in high concentration inside the cell and the external environment of the cell has low concentration of CO2. So by the process of diffusion, again, diffusion was spontaneous movement. Remember this word, spontaneous movement means the movement that takes place by itself. It does not require any energy. Okay, there are certain processes that require energy. If we have to do the opposite of diffusion, means if we have to send up substance from its low concentration to high concentration, then we need energy. Okay, but this one is a spontaneous movement. Okay, and in the similar way, when CO2 accumulates in high concentration, it moves out of the cell by the process of diffusion. Okay, now similarly for oxygen also, oxygen enters the cell by process of diffusion when the concentration of oxygen inside the cell decreases. Now how? See, I was just telling you, when the cell is working, then it will consume oxygen. So the amount of oxygen inside the cell will keep on decreasing as soon as it will carry out all the metabolic processes. Okay, because it will also digest the food. It will digest the food to get energy. So what will it do? It will need oxygen. Okay, so the oxygen will become less inside the cell, and again when the outside of the cell, as soon as there is a difference of concentration of oxygen inside and outside the cell, the oxygen moves inside the cell from outside. Why it is moving from inside outside to inside? Because now the oxygen is less in the cell and it is more outside the cell. Okay, so that's why the oxygen enters the cell by the process of again diffusion. Thus, diffusion plays an important role in gaseous exchange between cell as well as cell and its external environment. By this diffusion process, the cells can exchange gases between them also, because you know in the body the cells are close to each other, there are many cells, and it also helps the cell and the external environment to help in the gaseous exchange. Okay, very important thing, diffusion, because if diffusion will not be there, then you can see how oxygen or carbon dioxide or water transportation in the cell will take place. Okay, so now till now we talked about gases only, means like carbon dioxide and oxygen, only about the gaseous exchange according to the diffusion. But the point is, water also obeys the law of diffusion. Okay, water also obeys the law of diffusion. Now, the movement of water molecules through such a selectively permeable membrane is called osmosis. Now, a new term has been there, osmosis. You know what is a selectively permeable membrane? I told you that cell membrane is a selectively permeable membrane that allows only a certain substance to pass through them. Okay, so water also obeys the laws of diffusion. Now, movement of water molecules through such a selectively permeable membrane is called osmosis. So what is osmosis? Osmosis is nothing. It is a kind of diffusion that is for water. Okay. Osmosis is the passage of water from region of high water concentration to region of low water concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. And before this, we discussed about CO2. What we were saying, diffusion of CO2. It takes place from high concentration to low concentration. So it similarly, the process is going on here. High water concentration to region of low water concentration. So only the difference is that osmosis comes for water. The movement of water molecules through such a selectively permeable membrane is called osmosis. Getting it? So this completely, the question that we asked in this, that we put at the start of the video was, how does movement of substances takes place into the cell? And you know, these are the important things like oxygen, water, carbon dioxide need to be eliminated, and the cell continuously need oxygen and water. So how? By the process of diffusion. Okay, again, what is diffusion? It is the spontaneous movement of substance from region of high concentration to the region of its low concentration. Okay, from high concentration to region of low concentration. Please remember the definition. Now, after understanding diffusion, there is a question. What will happen if we put a cell, whether it is a animal or plant cell, into a solution of sugar or salt? Understanding? The question is, what will happen if we put a cell into a solution of sugar or salt? So now let's discuss the first condition. The first condition says, if the medium surrounding the cell, means the external environment of the cell, if the medium surrounding the cell has high water concentration, then the cell, means solution is dilute. Okay, we have studied in that chapter what is the difference between concentrated and dilute. Okay, the medium surrounding the cell has high water concentration than the cell, means outside the water is more and inside the cell water is less, means the solution is dilute. Then the water will move inside the cell by osmosis. And if I say that water will move inside the cell, then what will be its consequence? That the cell will swell up. Getting it? Very important. The external environment has high water concentration than the cell. So means water is high outside the cell and it is less in the cell. So the water will move inside the cell by osmosis and the cell will swell up. Such solution is known as hypotonic. Means the solution which has concentration less. Means it is a dilute solution. The solution is known as hypotonic. So the question can come across you, when a cell is placed in a hypotonic solution, what will happen? And you can say the cell will swell up or the water will move inside the cell by the process of osmosis. Okay. Now, other important thing is, water is free to pass in both the directions. Okay. Water are free to pass in both the direction, but more water will come in the cell than it will leave. Getting it? Means water will move in the both the direction, but the net movement will be inside, because more water will come inside the cell more than it will leave. Okay, the more water will come inside the cell and it will also leave the cell, but it will be in less amount than the water that will come inside. Okay, so water molecules are free to pass in both direction. We have to see the net movement, and net movement is inside the cell, so the cell become swell up because more water is entering the cell than it is leaving. Okay. The next condition is if the medium has a lower concentration of the water than cell, means if outside the cell the water is low in concentration, you can say the solution is concentrated. How is concentrated? Means the amount of solute was sugar or salt is more in the solution now. In the previous one, in the first one, the solution was dilute, means the amount of sugar or salt or solute we can say was in less amount. Here it is in more amount, so it has a lower concentration of water than the cell. Then what will happen? Definitely by the process of osmosis the cell will lose water. According to the process of osmosis, what does it say? It say that the water moves from its higher concentration to lower concentration. And definitely if the water will be lost by the cell, then the cell will shrink or the size of the cell will decrease. Okay, such solution is known as hypertonic solution. The solution that I am saying is in which the cell is kept. Okay, the external medium, that is referring to the hypertonic. Similarly, the previous one, hypotonic, in which the cell was kept. Again, the question asks, if the cell is kept in a hypertonic solution, what you will observe? Definitely, you will observe that the cell will lose the water by the process of osmosis and the cell will shrink. Okay, such solution are known as hypertonic. Please remember this word hypotonic, because at times they can be very confusing. Okay, I am again saying the solution that we are talking about is the external medium in which the cell is placed, because the question was what will happen if we put in cell into a solution of sugar or salt. Okay, and similar thing will happen again water crosses the cell membrane in both direction, but this time more water leaves the cell than enters it, so the net movement of water is outside. We can say the net movement of water is outside to the cell, so the cell will shrink. Okay, third condition is if the medium has exactly the same water concentration as cell, there will be no net movement of the water. Definitely if the concentration of water outside the cell and inside the cell is same, then there will be no net movement of water. Okay, and such solution is called isotonic. Iso means same. Okay, the meaning of word iso is same. So isotonic solution means when the concentration of water is same outside and inside. Definitely if there will be no net movement of water, the cell will stay the same size. Again, water crosses the cell membrane in both the direction, but this time the amount going in is same as the amount going out. Okay, so we can say that osmosis is a special case of diffusion through a selectively permeable membrane, and here the selectively permeable membrane is the cell membrane. Okay, so we have discussed three conditions that what will happen if we put a cell into a solution of sugar and salt. So maybe first condition was if the medium surrounding the cell has high water concentration, it means solution was dilute and the solution name was hypotonic. In that the water will move inside the cell and the cell will swell up. Second condition was if the cell or if the medium has lower concentration of water, then definitely the cell will lose the water because outside the water concentration is less, and such solution is known as hypertonic and the cell will shrink in the hypertonic solution. Okay, and third was if the medium has exactly the same water concentration, so there will be no movement or net movement. We have to say no net movement of the water, so the size or you can say the shape of the cell will remain same. Okay, and important thing is that water moves in both the directions. Okay, but it is the net movement that we study, where if the net movement is more inside, then the water will move inside. Okay, the cell will swell up. If the net movement is more outside, then the cell will shrink, and if the net movement is equal, means you can say is same is zero, because outside and inside it's same, so net movement will be zero, no net movement, so the cell will remain of same size. So we can say osmosis is a special case of diffusion through a selectively permeable membrane. Okay, students. So the condition that we have discussed, the three conditions that we have discussed, you can also take a look at the home. How? By taking dried raisins, once you put them in water, a simple water, and leave them, and in another vessel, take a concentrated solution of sugar, okay, means dissolve sugar into the water and then place some raisins into it. After some times, what you will observe, that each gains water and swells when placed in water, means the raisins that were placed in water will swell up. However, when placed in the concentrated solution, it will lose water and consequently shrink. Okay, so it is the same as due to the, and why it is happening, because of the osmosis. Okay. Okay, so now we have completely discussed the diffusion, or you can say osmosis. The next point is unicellular freshwater organism, okay, that are freshwater organism that lives in water, and most plant cells tend to gain water through osmosis, means they try to take in the water in the body by osmosis. Absorption of water by plant roots is also an example of osmosis. So means water is high in concentration in the soil, and in the roots it is in low concentration, so the water tends to move into the roots. That is why it is saying it is also an example of osmosis. Okay, and as we have talked earlier, diffusion helps in the exchange of gases and water. We have discussed it in the earlier. I told you that carbon dioxide and oxygen are exchanged into the cells through the process of diffusion, and the previous three solutions we were talking about water. So the special case of water is, the condition that the movement is known as osmosis through the selectively permeable membrane. Okay, so diffusion helps in exchange of gases and water. Now again, different molecules move in and out of the cell through a type of transport requiring use of energy. What I was telling you in diffusion or osmosis, that it was a spontaneous movement, that it does not require the use of energy. It does not require, but there are certain substances, or you can say if you have to transport a substance from low concentration to high concentration, means in opposite direction, then you need to give it some energy, and this kind of transport is known as active transport. Okay, so this was certain different molecules move in and out of the cell through a type of transport requiring use of energy when they move opposite to what the concentration is. Okay, and the next is, you know that plasma membrane is flexible. We just when we took that three solutions, we knew the cell would swell up, the cell would shrink. Why it was? Because the plasma membrane is flexible. If it wouldn't have been flexible, then definitely the cell wouldn't have swell up, or cell wouldn't have been shrinked. Okay, so the flexibility of the cell membrane enables the cell to engulf in the food and other material from the external environment. It is a very important property. So flexibility of the cell membrane enables the cell to engulf in the food and other material from the external environment. This process is known as endocytosis. Okay, so this was all the things related to cell membrane. Definitely, yeah, when we study different structural organization, then in the cell membrane, it is, this part is given in the cell membrane, diffusion and osmosis. Okay, so I hope that diffusion and osmosis are clear to all of you. In the next video, we will start about cell organelles. Okay, but before that, let me tell you about a little information about cell organelles. You know that every cell has a membrane around it to keep its content separate from the external environment. We talked about it. It was plasma membrane or cell membrane. But some large and complex cells, including cells from multicellular organism, need a lot of chemical activities to support their complicated structure and function. And to keep these activities of different kinds separate from each other, these cells use membrane-bound little structures within themselves. And these membrane-bound little structures are called their cell organelles. Okay, and this is one of the features I told you in the eukaryotic cell. This is one of the features that membrane-bound organelles are present in the eukaryotic cell that distinguish that from the prokaryotic cell. Okay, and what are the different activities? Definitely, some are energy producing, some produce food like chloroplast, mitochondria, okay, and packaging, and otherwise there are many cell organelles that we have to study. So I hope that today's topic is clear to you. It was one of the most important topics, and frequently the questions are asked from it. Okay, in the next one, again, as I said, we'll be starting cell organelles, different endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi bodies, etc., and their functions and how they are present in the cell. Okay, so students, again, I would say that please stay inside your house, keep studying, and keep yourself safe. Okay. Thank you.